Hi, this is Ed, and it's May 12th, 2025. And you're looking at the background here. This is downtown San Diego, California. We're about 8 or 9 miles just north of the Baja, Mexico, Tijuana border. And so this picture was taken a couple of years ago from the airport, San Diego Airport Sheraton Hotel. And you're looking at the Embarcadero. It's a nice shot, of course. And the building with the green lights is the Westin Hotel. And that is on the corner of Broadway and State Street. Now, Joanne and I happen to live on State Street to the right of those green lights. And every Monday night, 5 o'clock, when we're in town, a small group gets together for happy hour at the Westin Bar. It's a tradition that's been going on quite a while. So if you're ever in San Diego on a Monday, 5 p.m., you're welcome. Join us. But it's Dutch treat. Okay. So to the right, further down the street, further down State Street, to the right of the buildings is the tourist district. And everybody knows that when they come to town, the convention center, the Hilton, the Marriott, the Hyatt, some other hotels, restaurants and bars. That's all along the seaport to the right. And to further right and across the water is Coronado Island, which is a beautiful place to live, of course, but also it's the headquarters for the U.S. Pacific Fleet, the U.S. Navy, and extremely well protected. And so if you want to be safe, this is a good place to be. So we're going to be joined by a few people in just a few minutes from the US and potentially from Canada and at least one from Europe. So it's going to be an international live broadcast recording session. And the theme is very interesting. It's about multinational corporations, basically, large employers of many people across time and space, across borders and cultures, across industries. But the key is, especially today, psychological safety in the workplaces as an employee recruitment tool, employee development tool, talent development. Talent's going to leave quietly or quickly if the workplace is toxic and dangerous, uncomfortable. So ROI is a theme developed by our featured speaker today, Heather DeCruz Cornaire, a business psychologist based in London. I've had the honor and the privilege to host Heather in person in a live meeting, in fact, more than one, in London that was hosted and wonderfully sponsored by the Global Trade Bank, HSBC, in their beautiful tower. Wonderful. We've had some recordings and lots of interesting people. And I've asked Heather to join us here in the global meeting room, in other words, on Zoom. And subsequently, the recordings will be displayed, exhibited, and marketed all across our extensive network, the Global Business News Media Network. Includes our YouTube station, which I launched in March of 2020 as a result of COVID crashing into our 30-year-old profitable business of meetings and events. And so I had to learn how to do YouTube. I had to learn how to be a happy TV talk show host. And so here I am. We have been fortunate to be able to develop, produce, finance, broadcast host more than 1,000 editions right here. And they're all available free. We want you to subscribe, but subscription is free to the YouTube station, the TV station. So it's youtube.com/@ Global TV Talk Show. No S. @ Global TV Talk Show. That's youtube.com/@ Global TV Talk Show. Free access, global, 24/7, 365, nonstop public relations, positive public relations for our speakers and our co-sponsors, and of course for our business, globalbusinessnews.net. I call that page 1 because it's the page that people go to. People look at our profile on LinkedIn, of course, and they go to the website. So we have a lot of eyeballs coming to that website. And it's a connecting place. It's a jumping off place into all the pages on that site. And there's a lot of pages. And you have connections to other videos and other articles and news items that I, in my role as editor, think are important for our global business audience, which is across borders and cultures, across industries and silos, across generations. And I love that. I think that's cool. So it's all about making connections. Oh, it's all about learning some new things or a new perspective on old things. And then the idea through our conversational approach, our dialogue, which is not scripted, very well organized, but not scripted ever. And I do that because it breeds continuity. So we're going to begin to bring people on to the screen now. And so here we go. Our first guest will be Dan Bolger. He and I have known each other a long time, but it's been a time since we've been together and communicated. So this should work. Here we go. Hello, this is Ed.
Ed, how are you? It's Dan Bolger.
It has been a long time.
Indeed, sir. Indeed, sir. You look great, Ed. How are things?
Yeah, good. I'm still kicking. Yeah.
And then some. And then some. Right?
Yeah, and then you too.
Yeah, we're rolling with the punches.
Yeah, well, thank you, Heather. Welcome.
Hey, hi there. Hey, Ed, my buddy.
Hey, how are you? Oh, you look
I'm
wonderful.
fine. I'm just warming up my voice. Do you do, look, Dan is a communication Jedi. And Ed, I mean, no one can talk like you. But I've recently discovered that we really should be protecting our vocal cords. So I do a lot of warm-up exercises now before I start doing any talking. How about you guys? Ed, do you do any warm-up exercises?
So you know what I do? I do a lot of media prep, that's for sure. And on voice, no, you know what I have is I tank up on coffee first and brush my teeth after having something to eat. And so I feel like I should be okay talking.
Well,
I have,
do you ever notice your voice gets tired? I mean, my voice cracks when I start to get when I'm talking for too long, especially because I'm a coach and I'm using my voice all the time. So yeah, you use a straw, so you get just a regular straw. You just get a tiny bit of water, and then you do warm up exercises for your vocal folds, and it really brings a clarity, and it's like a massage. It's like a massage for your whole throat. So I've been using this for the past few months. I've noticed such an improvement in my articulation and my voice.
so I have water and I have,
Hi, Diane. Nice to see you. Hi, Stephen.
Morning or good afternoon.
Okay, turn up your volume. We're talking about voice control. So turn up your
Yeah, no, I'm talking about looking after your vocal cords and massaging them by using a straw and some water. All the singers, this is what all the singers do. So you just,
Okay, can you hear me?
I do that with wine, Heather. It's called whistling wine.
oh, Stephen, I missed you. I've missed you.
hey, everybody, this is Dan Bolger and Stephen Howard and Diane Devitt and Heather DeCruz Cornaire. Did I say that right?
You always do. You always
Okay,
do.
good, good. Well, I practice. And so I was prepping. Hey, everybody, this is Dan Bolger. He and I have known each other forever, but there's been a gap where we've had no communication for, I don't know, at least 5 years, right?
I missed you, Ed. I missed you. Yes, back in the day.
Yeah. So where have you been? You've been overseas, right?
That's right. And I've been in I was in Albania on a diplomatic assignment.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah.
So did you work in the State Department?
Technically, it's an offshoot of the State Department. I was with an international security and peace organization called the OSCE. Right.
Yeah. So it's not CIA.
No, no, it's a little bit one or two steps removed. Let's just put it that way. Yeah.
Well, it's really interesting what President Trump has been trying to do. And some of the things are working fine, but others are scary. And USAID, see, I happen to know a little bit about USAID because I've done a number prior to COVID, prior membership in the National Press Club in Washington. And I held my meetings in National Press Club in Washington several years. And that was headed at the time by, of course, some people from K Street. You know what K
Mhm.
Street is, everybody, right?
Of
Lobbying
course.
center of the world. And so, and people, the intelligence community is of course, all over the place. And so I was fortunate to have meetings prior to going on YouTube. This is going back more than 5 years now, with people, leaders from within that group. And trust developed, rapport and then trust developed to the extent that we always had voices from within that community speak in person at our DC meetings. And that's when I learned about USAID and some of the other organizations. It wasn't because of my being on their payroll, wasn't it at all. I was happened to be a trusted person in the media. And so, and they wanted to get messages out. And that's why all that happened. This is going back a long time ago now. But to this day, I still have connections there. And whenever I do a live meeting in Washington, we have some people who don't really want to be identified from that community, but they show up. And I'll be glad to send you all a video link to one of the recent presentations by one of those people. There's nothing classified about it. It's just really interesting.
That sounds great, Ed. That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
So
Yeah.
in Albania, so then that's the Balkans, right?
That's right. So Southeast Europe, and when you think of the Balkans, you may typically think of Croatia or Serbia, sort of nestled in between, Hungary and Greece, right? In fact, one of your Intermark relocations colleagues, Irina Yakimenko, who you had an interview with last year, Intermark has just launched Balkan operation. A lot going on in the region, just to sort of encapsulate it.
So she's out of Russia now. She escaped, and they opened up an office in Zagreb. Is that correct?
That's right. I knew they, but they're also doing work in Zagreb is in Croatia, but they're also doing work in Serbia too. But again, it's an incredibly vibrant region with a lot of growth opportunities, and really just a fascinating experience for me. And Albania is just one of the 7 countries there. So yeah.
We didn't do a meeting there, but we went to somebody else's meeting in Croatia in what do you call it, Dubrovnik, and it was a wonderful place. We happened to go there. That's Joanne and I happened to go there maybe I don't know, half a dozen times now, and can't wait to go back. And it's just safe place and very, very entrepreneurial. And there's there was an occasion where it was during the summer, it was before COVID. We did an Airbnb on a luxury boat that went up and down the Croatian coast. Let me tell you, it was special, and it was wonderful experience, and very much loved the island of Rovinja, right off of Dubrovnik. Well, they call it Dubrovnik, but in English it's Dubrovnik. And then the city of List was a fabulous place. And then we went up to Venice. We went around the coast, and yeah, it was terrific. A wonderful area. I recommend it. We are recording, and you're on Global Business News TV, and we have a number of people that are joining us. I'm really delighted. We're going to run this for up to 90 minutes. Anybody who needs to leave earlier, that's fine. So this is globalbusinessnews.net, and I'm going to do the honors here. We have with us Dr. Ken Lloyd. Ken, raise your hand, from Studio City, which is right across from Universal Studios. And Ken is a PhD in organizational development and things related to that. Ken, to what extent, this is unrehearsed, everybody, but well organized. To what extent has your experience in LA and connections to Hollywood and media? You're a longtime New York Times syndicated columnist. And what was the theme of that?
First, let me just say it's nice to see everybody. Welcome. Happy Monday to all, and wishing all of you a great week. But yeah, in terms of the column that I had written for, gosh, it's 20 years, it was mainly dealing with people at work. What kinds of questions employees might have about whether it's hiring, whether it's something with their coworkers, dealing with a boss, you name it. The questions were all over the map, literally as well as figuratively, and just great fun to address them, see what people are facing at work, and see if I could provide them with a thought or two that might help. And questions would go literally from the sublime to the ridiculous, but I certainly enjoyed it, and kind of a nice way to reach out and have some contact with people that I would normally never meet from all over the country, and to a certain extent internationally. We're in some of the Canadian papers as well.
Being a leader in HR and related to that, you also authored some books, and one of them is right here. Oh, you can't really see it here. Oh, the camera is making it funny. Okay, well, the title of this is Performance Appraisals and Phrases for Dummies. And this is edition number 2. The first one was, I think you said 15 years ago.
Right.
So to what extent are you a teacher?
Oh, I think that all of us are teachers every day. I really look at us in that role as well as learners. And we have to be willing and interested in learning in whatever we can. So yeah, formally, I do some teaching. I do some career coaching and guidance and that type of thing. I occasionally do seminars, and that's more formal teaching kind of role. But even as managers, that's part of what managers and leaders are doing. They're really coaches, and a coach by definition is a teacher. But I also like it from the learning side as well, to consistently be reading, staying updated on what's going on in the news, which is sometimes a little stressful, but reading fiction as well as nonfiction. I just literally read that reading fiction is better for the brain than reading nonfiction. You know, reading nonfiction, here's fact, here's what occurred, as opposed to reading fiction. You have to learn the characters, the relationships, what they're really like, what's going on. You're thinking more about it. So just for mental development and frankly improving memory, reading fiction is quite helpful. And it's interesting as can be as well. I mean, not to digress, but literally, again, right now I'm reading a book called By Any Other Name. It's fiction about who really wrote Shakespeare's plays. And there's been controversy over that for generations. And this is a story that refers to an individual who's a direct descendant of a woman who may well have been the primary author of Shakespeare's plays. And the book does have a very strong feminist leaning to it about how women were excluded from playwriting. And even today, it compares and contrasts current and back in the 1500s, and how women were really set aside. And it gets at that issue as well. Very interesting. My point being is that, yeah, we're all teachers, we're all learners, and that's just part of the process.
And now I want to introduce John Verico, who is by definition a teacher and an author and a longtime government employee. Hi, John.
How we doing?
Hey,
Yeah,
welcome.
I'm glad you referred to me as a government employee and not being affiliated with the government, because it's a very different thing.
And so you were just at a conclave of some kind about government workers.
Oh, so yeah, that was a little workshop that was done for government workers who have been or are on the cusp of being displaced. And it was really about kind of what things that they should do to prepare for their next chapter, whatever that is. And so most of it was really focused on, resume techniques and that kind of thing. But there was also a lot of emotional support that was provided, because when you are, I mean, let's face it, change happens to us, right? And we can't always choose what changes. And so change can be very stressful, and especially when it's change that you didn't ask for or didn't expect. And that's when you're dealing with actual grief. And so the part of our brain that deals with our comfort zone is the same one that deals with fear. And, we process a change as a grief process, because it's in our mind, a change is the death of our comfort zone, which is kind of freaky. But the whole thing was really just trying to help people to, keep a good mindset moving forward, and show them that it's not the end. One of the things that I've always liked to say is that it will all be okay in the end. And if it's not okay, it's not the end.
Oh,
So
that's
know that we can
really
continue on.
brilliant. Wow. So this is all about teaching, but
Absolutely.
it looks like a TV show. And so it's the use of vocabulary and the juxtaposition with images, and it's like a screenplay and a presentation. And so This is Diane Devitt, who has been a longtime friend and definitely a media coach when I first started, and still to this day. And she's a NYU professor for 30 years. Again, guess what? Media, and has extensive New York leadership experience, and has been recognized by lots of very large corporations for um, being a brainchild and on meetings and events, and like, what color is your event going to be today? So I'm wearing blue stripe and sort of dark background here. I'll get out of the way, you see. And so, and she's bright yellow. Welcome, Diane.
Welcome. What an introduction. I'm happy to be here, and I love that the focus is on education. I think that's the title that I covet the most. You know, is a teacher, and so thank you, Ed. And yes, I've been teaching. I taught at NYU in their tourism and hospitality area, meetings and events. So yes, and the second edition of my book just came out about 2 weeks ago. So I'm very proud of that one. It is What Color Is Your Event, which you probably can't see here, but a little bit. And I tell about the event personality in it. So that's really what my soapbox is teaching the value of a meeting, an event as a communication tool, and ensuring that the people who are responsible for organizing these tasks are properly trained. So that's my soapbox. And aside from that, I enjoy my life as a speaker. So good to be with all of you.
So everyone's going to have a chance to talk for sure, and even display some things using my screen share if you want. So here's the deal. Diane Devitt has found herself positioned today, fortunately, taking her experience and her education and her burning desire to train people in large corporations to not blow, lose money, or be sued when producing events. In other words, how do you do it safely, securely, to maintain decorum, but also maintain safety? Our lead speaker today, Heather, her topic is all about psychological safety, and we're going to get into that in just a few minutes, Heather. But Diane, I think this is the first time you're meeting Heather. You may have been on a group show,
Right.
previously. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So ROI is taking on a new meaning today, as of today. and Heather, tell us about your ROI and what you're going to be talking about in a few minutes.
Yeah, I will. And John, thank you so much for what you shared, because I work very much with evidence-based theory as a business psychologist, and what you referred to about the part of the brain that deals with comfort also deals with grief. It really reminds me of Kubler-Ross, and we used a lot of Kubler-Ross. I use it in my coaching methodology, meaning that when you can gain something, but when you gain, you also lose something, and you can lose your identity through change and things like that. So that really resonated with me. So anyway, back to ROI, because I love seeing you all. Stephen, haven't seen you for a while. Diane, haven't seen you for a while. Ken, I just listened to your interview with Angela on the red couch. John, I haven't seen you for ages, so it's lovely to see all your lovely faces. And Dan, I worked with Dan for many years, and I invited Dan to come along today. So I really wanted Chris Exline to be on, because I think he would have so much in common with Dan. So I definitely think Chris, Dan, you can connect up. Maybe I'll do an introduction offline. But anyway, back to the thing.
And I'll be glad to set up another show.
Yeah, that would be
because
brilliant.
Chris is hopefully the war in Ukraine is winding down, and Chris has doubled down, tripled down on his initial time and investment in Ukraine, and has opened up new stores.
Yeah.
And in the face of all that danger and risk.
Yeah, he's doing brilliant work. But yeah, and I'd already mentioned to Dan about Chris that I think they would just have wonderful conversations together. But yeah, so I presented at an industry conference, not last week, the week before, and I presented as a speaker for the Association for Business Psychology. And I presented on my topic. It was all about inclusion, and it was called A New ROI, Return on Inclusion. And so what I wanted to do was talk to you all about the traditional meaning of ROI and how metrics really are set up for statistical evaluation, even though we have qualitative studies. Everything in mobility is kind of measured around what is a failure of an assignment, or how much does an early repatriation cost. Nothing is ever measured about the really good things that come out of, for instance, someone being able to operate internationally in a new culture, and the skills and experience they bring to the company's operations when they repatriate. There's no measurement, for instance, on that. So what I presented at the conference and what I wanted to share with you today was this trifecta of inclusiveness around inclusiveness of data and human-centered approaches, as well as measurable metrics that measure numbers. We also need human-centered insights to balance those metrics and bring depth as well as scale. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about, the direct costs of an international assignment balanced with the indirect costs, and what inclusion means for all of us. And what I'd like to do at the end of the exercise is share a word cloud with how inclusion means different things for all of us and what it means. So that was the idea behind today's session, to share some of the key insights from the conference and see how you guys all feel about it.
I'm really delighted that you've chosen this platform. I'm really honored. So Diane is working on a new business, a new idea that's being turned into a business, and she's going to tell us about that. I'm going to preview it a little bit, Diane, and please correct me if I stumble. But it's all about training the boss's assistant in a structured way to how to not get sued, how not to waste money, and how to maximize business meetings. And what did I leave out?
You just, no, I just love your interpretation sometimes. It's closed.
I don't have any notes. I'm just doing it from
no,
memory.
I think it's pretty good. No, you know what? I designed an online certificate in teaching the business of meetings and events. And in the course of researching the target audience, which was the non-professional, my eyes were just opened wide, and led me to the HR community, because 85 to 90% of EAs are charged with planning meetings and events. Take care of this, Jane. Plan the event. Jane is petrified. She doesn't know the business of planning, the negotiation skills that are involved, the strategy, the tactics, the communication, the ROI, defining objectives and goals. She flies by the seat of her pants with the help of vendors and hotels who are not negotiating prices because they can. She doesn't know the difference. The meeting is held, it goes fine. From a professional point of view, it's fine. It's okay. It could have been fabulous and could have reaped a lot more return. And the cycle continues because the boss says, "Great job, Jane." And so it goes. So then when Jane says to the boss, because I've had personal conversations with these EAs, I'd love to do training. What training? You do a good job. Or the other factor that comes up, which is the big 4-letter word, is time. So all these corporations who offer L&D and training, for the most part, they're offering leadership training, communication, strategy, whatever it is, right? Leadership skills, but they don't offer anything on meetings and events. And if they did, they don't also accompany that with the time investment. And the generation now, my generation, I studied all hours of the day and night. I'm sure some of you did as well, to just learn our craft and learn about it. But this generation, if I'm going to learn, I'm doing it on your time. So the time investment, just like when you're training management, you know, that you schedule a day for training, that's not done for this support staff. So that's the interesting quandary that I'm in, which led me to a different target audience to market this product to. Because in the end, it benefits everyone. When the EA or the marketing assistant or coordinator is trained, she or he is going to save money and increase the return, and then everyone benefits in the end. So that's what I'm working on right now. So thank you for that platform.
Oh, you bet. So we're going to circle back. Stephen Howard, welcome again. Your main topic the past year, Humany, HUMONY, is exactly what Heather's been talking about here.
That's why I'm here. I'm here to learn from Heather today, Ed. No, seriously, when I saw your email, this return on inclusion, it just resonated with me, and I thought, wow, that has legs, as we used to say, and I really want to hear her thoughts on that, and particularly if it's measurable. That's the question I came here, and I guess she's going to answer that question a little later.
Heather?
Yeah, well, that's the tricky thing. That's why no one really, it's much more costly to measure people's voices and to ask them to contribute in a way that doesn't include a Likert scale, because with a Likert scale in a pulse survey, or if you just want to do a quick heat map for employee engagement, it's much more efficient to design a questionnaire with a 3-point, 5-point, 7-point scale, measure it, push it into a statistical field where you have a couple of outliers, tick the box and say, I've checked the health and well-being of my staff. And you don't have to disclose what it is. You can just say, well, I've done what I needed to do as an employer, but you give absolutely no depth or no voice to the people who are completing the survey. So what research is, or what current research is showing us, is that you have to have measurable metrics, so you have to have a metric system that does at scale is able to capture what is happening on the surface so that you can take the pulse. But then if anything significantly arises, you need also to have instruments that are human-centered, like focus groups, interviews, even quick check-ins. It can be done via your management team, and it can be as simple with psychological safety as just asking someone, how are you today? And then being able to pick up, if you really listen, whether or not there might be something else going on in that person's team, and that they might need a little bit more time or some training or some coaching. And it really is an effective and cost-effective way to provide an intervention, or a mini intervention, if you will, for micro adjustments. And these micro adjustments could be the difference between you retaining your talent, or could be the difference between people loving being at work, or people then phoning in sick and then not turning up, and you have an absenteeism problem, or you have all of a sudden you lose your talent, the workforce is disengaged. So what we're seeing is that there is this push and pull, and it has to be balanced between what you're measuring. Is it valuable, or are you measuring it just because that's what you've always done? And that's the key. because what we can measure and how we can measure it is usually very easy, especially if you've got quants on your team, or you've got people like Ken who are organizational psychologists. He will know exactly what I'm talking about. And then you can just generate, yeah, you know, we've got a bell curve here, and the majority of people, they're in this sweet spot, it's okay. But then what's happening is we're seeing differentiation in shared lived experiences. People are not living in the same world anymore as we were 40, 30 years ago. We're all living differentiated lives, and we can feel excluded. And even though my focus is on international mobility, and I worked in HRM and international HRM, you know, before I started working in this field, and started my journey into research to find out what's actually happening dynamically. And so what I'm seeing is, and I advocate both. Look, there is finding a way to measure ROI. And for instance, KPMG has done great work last year. They, in their studies, told us that the average cost of an assignment is $800 million US to $1.25 million. This is good to know. This is what we need to know. And we need to benchmark what we're paying with our supplier costs and everything else. So it's important to know at scale what these average costs are. What it doesn't tell us is that an early repatriation, or that a failed assignment that will then lose the talent from that company and all the associated sundry differences that are associated with that in the team, how much that will cost a company. Also, what it doesn't tell you is that if you provide that person that's moving with coaching support that assists their health and well-being, their mental health, the emotional roller coaster, the roller coaster that John was talking about, of this change that we're all going through, the cost of a coaching assignment is 0.3% of an average failed assignment. So it's a no-brainer. And the inclusion factor is that if we include metrics, even if you select from your talent pool a couple of your employees that are in the main hubs where you're moving them in your international mobility cycle, if you measure some of the experiences that they're having, not just with metrics, but by having a 1-hour interview that is then looked at perhaps across regions. You could take APAC, or you could take the North America, or you could take Europe, and then maybe even cumulatively look at some of the impact trends that are arising from there. That could be just a couple of hours work that is a massive investment that you will have a return on, because you will have a deep understanding at depth of what is happening to that employee internationally and on assignment. And it won't just be a tick box exercise of, we have a supply chain with 30 partners and they've all provided the service on time and in budget, but you don't really know from the happy sheets what has really happened. And you certainly will not hear anything from the accompanying partner or the accompanying spouse, because they're just not included in the equation at all. So that's really
where the
that's where we are. So so I'd like to just ask everyone now, and you can either put it in the chat, or you can, Ed, you can do a little round robin, but what does inclusion mean to you? Just specifically, just take a minute to think. And I'm not talking about the DEI initiatives. Yes, of course, they're really important for an employer, but for us working from the ground up, what does inclusion mean? What does it mean for us as individuals and as human beings? Ed, what does it mean for you when you hear the word inclusion?
With respect to an international assignment?
Yeah, or even just generally when you hear the word inclusion, what does it mean for you?
Not being left out, that I'm part
Brilliant.
of all the discussions. And I
Yep.
want to throw in here real quick, everybody should use the chat and put their website or email and share with everybody, because that's an ROI for you going forward a week or 2 or 3 from now. Okay, inclusion with respect to the international assignments and the idea, the concept of psychological safety. The biggest problem is a screw up at home that the boss doesn't know because the employee is afraid to be open and or share too much personal information. But my research, independent, not scientific at all, but just because of my wonderful connections over the years, made a hell of a lot easy by doing this show and then the distribution of these shows subsequent to the original broadcast date has created a huge network that is not watching this today. They're going to be watching it weeks, months, maybe even a year later. International employees, let's just say Americans going into Europe or anywhere, they are not welcomed by the locals. They are afraid. The locals are afraid of the American, the international assignee. And the employee is usually very well paid and taken care of, but the spouse, and if there's kids along, a lot of companies don't want anything to do with it, but that is the crux of the issue because it's not psychologically safe for that spouse or partner. Never mind the kid. The spouse is an outsider. Other people don't want to know them. They've got enough close friends already. And so being the outsider is being isolated. And not everybody is Tom Cruise and with a Top Gun mentality of going out and taking things by the horns and whatever. People are afraid. They don't like it. They're going along with the employee. Inclusion means what you said in coaching, psychological safety, creating a verve, a pathway towards being psychologically safe in a threatening, non-inclusive environment. Is everybody speechless?
I'll throw
Yeah.
something out there.
Okay.
I'll throw something out there, and I'll use an actual example. I worked in a research and development organization, and the rule of thumb was that the next good idea can come from anywhere. And so we had to be open to a vast variety of potential solutions and opinions and perspectives, because without them, we might never find the solution to the challenges that we were trying to address. And that's what's so critical, because you don't know what perspective somebody else has. You don't know what their background has brought to them. You don't know what they're seeing from their perspective. There's a thing that I do when I do training about a very similar topic, actually. And there's a box, and inside that box, there's an object, and you have no idea what's inside that object, what's inside that box. So there are two holes in it. One is in the top, and if you're looking down into the top, what you see when you look down is a circle. So your assumption then is that what's in that box is round. It's a ball, it's a globe, whatever. You're going to treat that box as such. But in that other hole that you can't see, but somebody else does see on the side, when they look in to that box, they don't see a circle. They see a triangle. And so in their mind, and the way they're handling that box is what's inside that is triangular in shape, or a pyramid. But until those two folks talk to each other and share their perspectives, neither of them know that what's inside that box is actually a cone. Round from one perspective, triangular from another. And so that, that can be a very big eye-opener for people who are so focused on whatever it is they want to accomplish without bothering or caring what somebody else has to say or what somebody else is seeing or their perspective.
That's a great perspective, John. One of the companies that I worked for, I started a box, an anonymous shoe box with a And if anyone had an idea, they just put it in and it was up to them to put their name or not. That management would read. And it was interesting what came out of that. You know,
Stephen,
people
what do
who-
you think of that?
Oh, anonymous feedback can be good. I actually prefer non-anonymous feedback because seems to be a bit more authentic. And you, as long as you do, again, you have to have that environment of psychological safety where people are not afraid to speak up. So if you don't have, I mean, anonymous feedback, not to criticize Diane at all, but in many organizations, and I worked in several of these where we had anonymous feedback, they were kind of toxic environments as well, which is the reason they had to be anonymous, because people were afraid to speak up. So to me, when I go into an organization, I see that, I kind of counsel them and say, is that the message you want to send, that people should be afraid to speak up? Or should we start making changes in such a way that as leaders, we create an environment that is psychologically safe and people are not afraid to speak up? And I particularly do this. My new phrase, Ed, by the way, is working lately with a lot of women, is be silent no more. Because women are too often silent in the workplace or silent in society. And so my kind of hashtag in working with people is, with women particularly, is be silent no more.
Heather.
And can I just
Yeah.
add to that? So
Yeah.
Stephen, yes, absolutely everything you said, and you were right. Like that, when I first started in this job, I was in a management position. I could feel the negativity in it, and I could feel that people didn't want to say anything. So we started out anonymously, but then when a good idea would be recognized to Stephen Howard, because he great, in other words, I built on the recognition. And then after a while it became, no, you got to put your names. It's just too much fun. But that first step was, don't be afraid to let us hear your voice. Yeah.
So Heather, the fear of being bullied at work or about work, never mind the schoolyard, but at work, bullying. How, as a leader, as a business psychologist, how would you recommend that? That's a toxic work environment, right?
It is. And do you want to put my slide up, Ed, or do you want me to put the slide up so that I can show the different layers? I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
I'm happy to share my screen if that's what you
No,
prefer.
I'm sharing mine, but you should put it up, okay? Because I don't know how to do that efficiently.
Yeah. Okay. So.
Okay. My screen share is open to you.
Okay.
And by the way, to everybody who's on the show, if you have something you want me to display, and the reason why the visual is stronger than just the words that everyone is saying, the visual will be remembered. And by the way, it becomes a permanent feature of this
Can
program.
everyone see that, or I haven't got it?
Yeah, you can go full screen with it if you can.
Yeah,
it'll be
I will.
easier.
Is that
But
I'll zoom
no,
it as well.
It's got smaller. Okay, now it's centered. And if
Yeah,
you'd like to enlarge
I
it,
need
it would
to.
be
You can
best.
just go to use the
Yeah,
slideshow version.
I'm
There
in
you go.
slideshow now. Hang on a minute. I need full screen. Hang on, it's the little thing at the bottom, isn't it? There.
Oh, that's
There
it.
you go.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's huge. It's now huge on my screen. So I'm hoping.
By the way, I love your company name, Cafe Coach.
Yeah, it's a little bit. It's not really applicable to the work I do now, but I have a strong legacy feeling, and that's how I started in informal settings with my coaching concept. But we don't really have a cafe culture in the UK, so that's why it was quite cool, because we're not in Mediterranean Europe, where they do have a cafe culture. So anyway, we're more tea drinking, but although we do have a coffee culture now. But to
Yep.
Stephen's
But you have a
point,
pub culture.
we certainly have that. I don't think I could have called it pub coaching, though. I think I may not have had serious intended coachees coming along for that session, but yeah. So I think, getting to Stephen's point, and to Diane too, And Ed, I've got some really good feedback from you all on what inclusion means for all of you. And Ed said, coaching and psychological safety. But for me, coaching and psychological safety is just one area. In the research study that I did that won multiple awards globally, which also includes, by the way, big data trends at scale from the massive industry players. So it was very, very synergetic and integrative of big data trends and how we can add value with human-centered insights. So these are the human-centered insights. So the key results showed that coaching is a human-centered insight that is extremely cost-effective for companies to invest in if they really want to increase their ROI. And the reason it's so effective is because it helps the workforce identify their blind spots. And by identifying blind spots in the workforce, it also uncovers some of the blind spots, perhaps indirectly, that the employee or the organization isn't even really aware of, because there will be psychological contract breaks within there that are being mitigated through the coaching process. So we then have an area of psychological contract. The psychological contract, for people who are not psychologists, this might sound a little bit, oh my God, is it a contract? Is it legal? No, it's not. Rousseau did a lot of work on psychological contract, and she found that this is essentially an unwritten contract. It's the contract that we might have with our significant others, that they think you're going to lose weight, you're not going to lose weight. Why do they think you're going to lose weight? Because you may have indicated with certain things that you're going to do something, and the assumption is then made that your behavior will be indirectly in a certain way, even though you haven't actually vocally expressed anything. And it's exactly the same at work. At work, we could have an example where a manager has high expectations of their team. The team is aware of it, but the team feels that they will be rewarded at some point because of the high input that they're putting to be productive. None of that is written down. None of that's discussed in the interview, and yet it exists. And this emerged through research into by another American psychologist called Argyris, who was looking at motivation in the workplace in the 1950s. So this has been around since the 1960s, and it's really changing. What we're seeing is with the millennials and the Gen Z, what they really want is they want more relationships. They want relationships at work. Work is no longer just about transactions. I will do this and you will reward me with a bonus or with a higher salary or with a higher title. So what we're seeing is, especially post-pandemic, that the difference between being included at work, health and well-being being valued, and this feeling of care, this feeling of not even duty of care, but the feeling that the people at work who are in leadership positions actually care about me, who I am. And this isn't about authenticity and bringing your whole self to work. These are initiatives a bit like Casual Friday. Let's all come in casually on Friday. But it doesn't really change anything. These are real insights. And then we have the employer and employee relationship. It is definitely changing. Nobody can say that this is not changing. And as we move forward with external turbulence, the geopolitical uncertainty, wars, cash crisis, economic crisis, political turmoil through all of the elections that happened last year, and what we're seeing, resilience plays a huge part. So what we're seeing is that ROI is about financial security and stability, and the company has to make money and it has to be fit for its shareholders. But what about if the company looked at psychological capital? And psychological capital, which is my third aspect here between blind spots and employee relationship, psychological capital means that the company or the employer builds up an emotional treasure pot with its employees of resilience and goodwill and faith and all those wonderful things that make us human beings, so that in times of trouble and strife, there is enough in the tank to really push the employees and for them, everybody to push from their own volition. And if you put all of that together, it's about human connection. And for me, inclusion means human connection. So these were the insights really emerging from my research. And as you can see, it's not just about, okay, let's pay for the coaching as part of the package, and it's going to be the core part of the HR policy as we move employees. This is so much bigger than that. And I hope we talk about psychological safety, but we're isolating psychological safety as if that is the panacea to get us through bad management and absenteeism and lack of talent retention. And I see that as not being holistic enough. I would like holistically to see a context where we have a more understanding of the psychological contract. We build psychological capital for our workforce, and we don't just look at business outcomes from research. We look at workforce outcomes as a community. So for me, that's why return on inclusion is for me, the winning formula. So how do people feel about that? I'll stop sharing now.
Dan Bolger, jump in here, please. You're on mute.
Thank you, Ed. What everybody has shared thus far has been immensely valuable and really resonated with me. But and there's so many sort of insights and comments that I would like to share. But just getting to Heather's point on this, in what she's sort of teed up for us to ponder. I could just sort of give my own personal experience. I, shifted from the corporate sector in 2022 to take on a diplomatic role with an international organization, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Right, I was assigned to a Southeastern European field office to serve as an officer there. 80-person mission. 70% of them were local Albanians, and the remainder were internationals from all over Europe. One of the failures or gaps in my introduction to this international assignment, I think, was the lack of preparation, whether it was cultural training, language training, organizational development, leadership elements that might be helpful in my new role. None of that was provided or even considered. Someone had sort of vaguely sort of suggested, maybe you want to reach out to a U.S. expat who happens to work in the mission where you're being assigned. Right. So this goes to something that Ed had referred to earlier about, the discomfort, fear, relationship between Americans and host country nationals. Definitely that sort of tension does exist. I experienced it myself. However, to overcome it, there has to be some sort of measurable or institutionalized type of activity to mitigate that. And I think this goes back to what Heather had referred to earlier. When you're talking about interviews, doing
Sound.
like Albania to work, I should meet up with and consult with for an hour a local U.S. person. That should be part and parcel of the orientation. And so I think on my own, by my own volition, by my own sort of activity in reaching out, like Ed had referred to earlier. Not everybody is sort of Tom Cruise Top Gun to sort of take things by the reins. Well, you truly have to, in order to ultimately be effective in a new mission, in a new environment where you're not being provided any sort of training. And again, whether it's from things like language and culture, or leadership, or inclusion training, even. You really, a certain level of initiative has to be exercised, but that should be required. That should be a part of any sort of preparation going into a new place. And so, I served for 2 years in this assignment. But what I did discover, and this goes back to what Diane had referenced, in terms of anonymity or sort of speaking out. quite frequently in the mission where I was assigned, there would be town halls to discuss a variety of different priorities for the mission. And people were silent. People remained, quiet in the course of it, because, and this is something you may have learned, or one could have learned in cultural training, was there's very strict hierarchies in many European cultures. And that very much was the case in a place like Albania, where those who are at the lower echelons wouldn't speak out, wouldn't want to make waves. I think there's the old Asian proverb, the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. Well, that does apply in some cultures. And so you had a lot of that sort of a perception of consensus, perception of agreement that might take place in the course of any sort of formalized town halls with the ambassador as leader would sort of present to the mass office, and yet not really get much sort of constructive feedback. But I think one just to sort of wrap up, I think one of the key elements that in the Venn diagram that Heather had featured regarding human connection, this is absolutely crucial to the I think the effectiveness of an individual worker who's been on assignment, an expat who's trying to integrate well, but also to serve as a leader, performing a specific function. I called it managing by walking around, understanding what the roles within your own department and then within adjacent departments, and as well with leadership. One has to exercise a great degree of personal initiative, especially when you're in an international assignment, and especially if you haven't been given a lot of preparation. One of the, and I'll just sort of close with this, when you're working on an international assignment, to use a sort of US high school sports analogy, you know how things are when you're playing home on your team. All of the different, the audience is familiar, the place is familiar with every game. Well, it's like playing away every day while you're living as an expat. You don't have control of the variables. The landscape is different. And so you're definitely, as Heather had alluded to earlier, operating outside of your comfort zone. I think John may have even alluded to that as well. So
Stephen, you have lots of international experience, and you were, please make it right if I screw up here. But as I understand it, you were by yourself on these international assignments. Is that right?
Yes and no. First few I was with major U.S. multinational organizations, but didn't have the kind of support that people have in today's world on international assignments. But listening to Dan, boy, the thought that just ran through my head is, as reflecting on my career, once I became familiar, I lived in Singapore for 21 years, Dan, and probably about year 5 or 6, I became very comfortable, and Singapore became my home field. And boy, did that change. That's probably one of the reasons I stayed overseas 21 years and then went to Australia for 12, is I became very comfortable on that playing field and no longer saw it as an away game every day. So thanks for bringing those memories back, Dan.
Ken?
I just want to interject. It's like I think what you've alluded to, Stephen, is truly important. And this, I think, speaks to a broader theme, is sustainability. That when on an assignment or deployed for a particular mission, diplomatic, business, you truly need to spend a significant amount of time in that destination, understanding that particular country, but also neighboring countries. I think one of the real issues and gaps of U.S. foreign policy, U.S. diplomatic policy, is that folks are on such a rotational kind of schedule, with very sort of short-term in and out, parachuting in type of dynamic, that you don't get to spend enough time in a place to, as you said, treat that location as a home field. because that takes time, because you definitely have to build trust. And this is actually I think very much a measurable sort of dimension, is that the amount of time, and this is a metric, the amount of time you spend in a country, I think will correlate to the degree to which you can build trust, you can really be effective, and you can become a leader and understand the landscape most effectively.
You could measure comfortableness. So, I encourage Heather to measure that. At what point do expatriates feel comfortable in an overseas assignment? I think it helped me, Dan, in that I was 23 years old when I first moved to Singapore. I'm totally wet behind the ears. I mean, I'm still wet behind the ears, I think, but very curious, and I was like a dry sponge. I just absorbed everything. So I think that factors into it. Your mindset as you enter an overseas assignment, whether you're 45 years old and you think you know everything and you want to do it your way, or you're a 23-year-old kid like me who says, well, I mean, I'm here to learn, and makes a big difference.
I have a completely boomerang comment to make now to everyone. You're not surprised, but years ago I met a man, and he was actually was one of the first people to get into the translation business. And his theory was that when you speak someone's language, you reach their heart faster. You make a connection faster. And I couldn't disagree with him. And he used to train people who hired taxi drivers, or this or something that was a one-on-one with people throughout their day, and they couldn't understand. And I'm not, nothing political, but I look at the new Pope who came in, and he speaks 5 languages. And right away, I think about the impact that he's going to have, because he'll know the word to use. And so I wonder, from the HR relocation point of view, how many people who are put into new positions take the initiative themselves or are supported by the companies. Before you go to Armenia, do you speak Armenian? Before you go to, a certain place, do you take the initiative to at least be able to say a few words? I think that, that's just a thought that came to my mind.
Well, that's a brilliant mind. Thank you. I just want to comment about the Pope. I think it's a blessing that the Cardinals chose this guy, and for a lot of reasons. His experience, speaking 4 or 5 languages, calmness, seems to be honest, and the right antidote at the time it's needed out there. Ken, Floyd?
I totally agree with your comments about the Pope. And I think if anyone is looking for a paragon of inclusion, put him on the list. He seems quite remarkable in that regard. I think he is going to do so much good in this world. And I totally and fully encouraged by what the Cardinals did on this. To go back to some of Heather's points on inclusion and return on inclusion, today that inclusion has gotten such a political tone to it, and it's wrong, and it shouldn't at all. But we talk about it from the standpoint of return on it. If we're practicing real inclusion in an organization, yes, we have psychological safety, openness, respect for all of the employees. But if we really are doing that, they're going to feel free to be open and candid and express their thoughts, their ideas, their suggestions, their ways of approaching new problems. And that will generate some better results than just having people sitting there, as Dan said, like the hammered nails, quietly, silently, just going along with whatever is happening. There'll be a much greater return from our people if they have and sense the freedom to express their thoughts. And they might not be perfect, but a so-called questionable idea can then lead to an open discussion that could generate some real creative solutions. So the idea of bringing in everyone and being truly inclusive will definitely lead to a return on that investment. I think it's a great way to look at it, Heather, and I really like the way you're approaching it with metrics and analytics as well to really further the whole communication process in this field.
Ken, let me jump in and ask you, this is again unrehearsed, everybody. The psychological safety aspect of people in LA helping people who have been helping everybody, but helping the people specifically who have lost homes, lost a sense of belonging, lost safety.
Absolutely. You know, it's interesting. I'm seeing more around LA. You drive past the Bel Air Presbyterian Church, for example, you'll see a sign there, among many other places. Thank you, first responders. All of this gratitude that's coming out for those that stepped up to help families, individuals in need. Yeah, we're friendly with many people who have lost their homes, as well as people whose children lost their homes and fully disrupted lives. And even if for those who didn't lose a home but live in the Palisades, they still can't go back. The homes smell like chimneys. The ground is still contaminated. There's questionable action being taken now by the government in terms of how deep they're going to be digging to remove contaminants in the soil. It's a real mess. And all that we can do is reach out, offer our help, offer our support. We had friends over just the other night because they're living in like their 10th hotel since this occurred. And just come on over, have dinner. They said, do you want to go out for dinner? No, come over. We'll just have a home cooked meal and just get a chance and let them talk and express what they're going through. And it's torturous, but it's going to be a long and slow process. And there are many that we know, literally many, who are simply saying, we can't put up with this anymore. At this stage of life, I don't want to try to rebuild. I'm leaving. And they're just going to turn down the decibels in some other community and just let this pass. And if it means taking a lower settlement on what was a home and now is a piece of contaminated land, so be it. The stress is just too hard on them. But for us to reach out, try and be understanding, supportive, fair, and generous really, really helps. And a lot of them will just want to talk and give them the opportunity to do so and listen and see if there are ways that we can help. And it's so terrible. I mentioned before how difficult it has to be for the children who went through COVID and had to go through remote schooling, and now they don't have their home, their community, their school, their church, their synagogue, all gone. And now they're set up somewhere else. It's going to be very tough on the generation of children that have gone through this in Altadena and out in the Palisades for sure.
So what is being done psychologically to make a psychologically safe place for the kids?
Yeah, well, what they're doing is they're putting them in different schools, in schools that they can get them into. They've put in some busing programs to help them get to and from. The teachers have been provided with some support tools to help these children, and just kind of going day by day. There's no obvious quick fix to this. It's rather unimaginable. And just to look at the devastation of the area, it's like nothing we've experienced in our lifetimes. To see that it's as if a gigantic bomb blew up a whole community. And now for the children to look at it, yeah, there'll be counseling. Counseling is being offered. Psychological therapy is being offered. There are a lot of programs that are reaching out to help them to get through this. But again, no quick fix. This is more, it'll be more like grievance counseling. And it's just going to take quite a while for people never to really put this behind them, but to, if you will, kind of understand and try to focus forward on where we're going. It's easy to say, it's very, very difficult to implement and for these people to handle. It's a real, literally a sadness.
Or are the
Can
schools?
I add to something to that?
Yeah, one sec, please. Are the school systems extending the school day to include some kind of psychological counseling in the form of a classroom exercise?
In terms of extending the school day, I have not heard that. They may be, but I don't really know the answer to that question.
Yeah. John, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one of the things that is critical during anything like this, or really in any situation, is knowing that you're not alone in this, right? And it's that sense of community, that opportunity to to share the vulnerability, to share the pain, and to share the resources and the healing and all of that together. That's probably the most critical thing, that when we're going through anything, any kind of a disaster, whether it's, you know, a large scale, something like this that's affected a lot of people, or just even on an individual basis, to know that somebody else has experienced that, is going through that, it can be very, very helpful, very therapeutic. And I think that also, I'm going to bring this back to the workplace, because I think if we're in a culture where everybody remains silent and they're afraid to speak up, then people start to feel isolated individually and they won't contribute. Whereas if the culture opens up and allows for feedback, allows for inclusion, allows for people to share, then all of a sudden others can go, yeah, I'm feeling that too. Oh yeah, I noticed that too, but I didn't want to say anything. And then all of a sudden you can really heal and grow together, no matter if it's a community recovering from a disaster or a workplace that's trying to change their culture. And I think that's really critical. And if I might ask Heather a question at this point, because you broke down some things that are really, really important, because we all know in our minds, in our hearts, inclusion is important. It makes sense, right? Duh. It should be a no-brainer. You want to hear everybody's ideas so that you can come up with the best solutions and all of that. It sounds absolutely logical. You've come up with a way to put metrics to this that can convince the leadership, hey, you guys really need to change your focus. You need to do this, because if you don't, this is what you're losing. And I love that. But now is the tough part. How do you get them to actually change things based on these metrics so that there are new procedures in place, new processes in place, and ultimately change that culture? And just adding to that, have you had the opportunity to perhaps go back to an organization after these metrics have been presented, after they've made change, to see if did they really implement something for real, or did they just do nice, we'll pretend to do this? We get so many of those kinds of results from workplace surveys, right? Oh yeah, we'll just put this Band-Aid on this and just move forward. Did they really make change, and what kind of results that we're seeing?
Really good questions, John, and very similar to what Stephen said at the beginning about, well, this is all great, but how do we do it? How do we drive it forward? Because psychological safety, if you have a psychologically safe culture and environment where people can share without fear of judgment, and it's non-toxic, then that's the stepping stone. This is the stepping stone. But at the conference where I presented, this triggered a huge debate around return on culture. So some people who are specialists in culture then said, this is all great, Heather, this is what I'm trying to do. I talk about ROC, return on culture. And then the whole thing started up with, well, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? But anyway, to break down what you've just said, and perhaps to talk about what Stephen was saying about how you do it. So in terms of international mobility, and what I can tell you about where I am right now, based upon the fact that this research was done 2 years ago. First, you've got the research, you've got the insights. You've got to pick them apart. I mean, I had thousands of pages of data that had to be interpreted and thematically analyzed. I'm now at the stage where I'm out in the practitioner community. I'm sharing the insights, but getting feedback from, for instance, the direct clients with RMCs, clients of REA, because REA was the commissioning client. So what we're doing is, what we found is, do you remember post-pandemic when employers and the workforce, when mental health, finally the awareness around mental health was no longer taboo, people could talk about it? Do people remember the notion of having first aiders in a company? And those first aiders would try and identify perhaps people who may have been remote working and it wasn't doing so well. And then health and well-being and resilience started popping in as industry trends. So what we're doing is we're seeing a shift towards inclusion first aiders. So it's the same as a first aider, but we're calling them inclusion champions. So the inclusion champion is almost like the person in the company that we speak to or that I interact with. And I actually have a wonderful quote. I'd love to put it up because this is what I did share.
Yeah,
I've actually
please
got it
do.
here on the screen. Let me put this up because this was, I didn't include this here but you've raised a really good point, and I think it's really important to share this with you. So I'm just, okay.
While we're waiting, Stephen, Dan, Diane, John, if you have a display that you'd like to show quickly, I'm very happy to accommodate that.
So I don't know if you can all see this here. Can you all see this now?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, so this was really the output. This was the outcome. And the source is a global mobility partner, a really huge company, actually based in Sweden last year. And if you read the comment of this manager about how a change is needed internally, but in order to make that change, it's going to take time. And for that, you need to have a game changer within the organization who's on board with the ideas and share the ideas that you have to create the psychologically safe aspect that it is that you want to change. And whilst acknowledging that it may be slow, if you have a champion on board that will be an inclusion champion for you, then you have already, you're almost there. You need, first of all, to have the champion on board before you can start making changes to policy or even start embedding a new culture. So this is where, again, this is the end part of the return on inclusion, that this is what we need more of. We need more game changers who understand the essence of human connection and what we're trying to do in order to game change, breaking toxic cultures and to create levels of psychological safety so that people's psychological contracts can be understood and companies can build psychological capital. And these are human-centered insights. This is a human-centered approach, but it works.
Speaking my language.
Yeah.
You know, you're
does-
all speaking the language of what a true meeting and event professional does. So in my book, and what I coined a phrase many years ago, permission to play, which was derived from Plato, because Plato enforced, as many of you probably know, a society that was built and supported citizens interacting in a positive environment. And a true meeting and event designer and planner producer produces an environment that allows trust. Because if you don't have trust, you're not going to have interaction. If you don't have interaction, you're not going to reap the return on investment. So the concept, yes, so Dan, sorry, yeah.
I'm going to buy your book and I'm going to read it, Diane, because I'm just curious. In the course of any sort of event, conference, retreat that you may talk about, in going back to what Heather said about a game changer, I realize having an organizer and a producer who's really effective is key. But what about the buy-in from the senior executive who asked that EA to get that retreat going? Do they have to be a voice in this equation to be sort of or it's been my experience that the most effective conferences, meetings, retreats have always you have to have leadership on board to drive home any sort of messaging that you're trying to cultivate, right?
Without a doubt, without a doubt. So that's what I call my closed door conversation. So through my career, I was tasked to work with the meeting department or the planners. But I always deferred to senior management and never did anything without the CEO knowing about it. I'll give you an example. And this applies whether you're speaking from a meeting and event point of view, or you're speaking about an internal team building effort or organizational effort in a company. I was producing an event for the global head of human resources. And this was 15, 20 years ago. And the topic was diversity. Now I came up with what the concept was, and this was the top 100 people of the global company. So the concept that I came up with was that the 5 executives who would be on the panel, you know, discussing this topic on the stage, they didn't know it, but I went shopping in the hotel and I set up 5 different chairs, a boardroom chair, a stool from the bar, a secretary's chair, you know, you get the picture. You know, an armchair, this and that, all different heights, styles, shapes, and forms. But I had gone to the CEO with this concept and I said, are you okay with me doing this? And he said, I love the concept. And what happened was these 5, so the 5 people were backstage and they were introduced. There were 4 men and a woman. I'll never forget it. And they walked on stage. The topic was diversity, and they all stopped in their place. The visual of that will never leave my mind. And the audience was silent while they sorted out who's going to sit on the lowest stool. The woman, of course, went right to the boardroom chair. She beelined to the boardroom chair because she got it. And everyone stood there. And so when you talk about things that you can do to break ice or to show people things or to get them to talk, I mean, there's all different tricks and things. But get to your point, Dan, without a doubt, you would never surprise the person, the top executives. Never. I would never.
I want to say thank you, Diane, for that visual example. I wish I was in that room to see that.
Oh, it was a good one.
I'm doing that.
Let me know how it goes, because it's a good one.
We'll talk about how to set up that dynamic.
It's a good one to use even, like I say, in an office. I go in for team building in an office. You have people come in, and one time, and here's the opposite of that. I took away the table. 10 seats around a table, but we had no table. People expected a table, so that 4th wall was gone. I love to do that.
I love that disruptive kind of thing. I've done the take away the table thing before. I love it. It's fun watching people.
I want to ask Heather about the ROI of working remote, and whose ROI? The company, the employee, and that, in my mind, relates straight line to an international assignment that is not virtual, it's real. And I'm sent to Albania or someplace. And was it a wise choice for the company to send me, a guy from Jewish background, into a predominantly Muslim environment? And you got to ask, who made that decision? And do companies prevent that from happening, or do they just wing it? What do you think, Stephen?
I think a lot of things go into consideration, quite frankly, Ed, and smart companies will take everything into consideration. I mean, I will admit the reason I got moved by Texas Instruments from Dallas to Singapore, there were 2 of us internally competing for the same job. I was 23 and single, and the other gentleman was like 32, owned his house, and we both owned our own cars. And of course, the company policy was they were going to have to, buy the house or cover him on the relocation costs of his house to make him whole, to move him. And I was a lot cheaper. I was making a lot less money than him too. So I think that factored in as well. So a lot of things go in there, but the key thing is it doesn't matter what the person's background is. I would say, what is their foreground? Are they curious? Are they adaptable? Are they resilient? Is their family resilient? Don't look at where the person comes from. That's important to understand their cultural roots, but can they go beyond their cultural roots? How do they adapt to others? And that's a lot easier in the United States these days, because it may surprise people here on the panel, 20% of the workforce in the United States today was not born in the United States. So we're dealing with people cross-culturally day in and day out, even though we all live in the same zip codes, but we're dealing with people cross-culture. So it's a lot easier now to understand, evaluate people on their cross-cultural communications expertise, their adaptability, their resilience, their curiosity than it was, 30 years ago when I first went overseas.
Isn't that our strength, Stephen? That multicultural neighborhoods, communities that we have?
I would argue it could be our strength, John. Right now, I think it's one of the most divisive issues that we have, and as a result, we're forming lines. We form organizations today as people in the United States, particularly for the purposes of exclusion rather than inclusion. If you don't go to my church, we exclude you. If you don't go to my college, we exclude you. If you don't come from my socioeconomic background, we exclude you. So I think it could be our strength, John. I think it was our strength back in the 1950s, 1960s, and 70s. But personally, I think it's a concern.
Culture has changed. I think we need to we need to go back to looking at what we have in common with each other before we look at the differences we have from each other. So we look at what we have in common, we create a bond, and then we look at how the differences add to.
If you haven't seen, John, the opening segment to the TV show Newsroom, where the news broadcasters answers a question from a college student, go watch it. It's called the Newsroom pilot series, and it's probably the most powerful 3.5 to 4 minutes of television ever created. And go watch that. Then call me and let me know what you think.
All right.
I'm going to look at that too.
Yeah.
To go back to Heather's point in dealing with what we're seeing in organizations today, as described by Stephen, we need champions. We need to serve as champions. We need to support those who are champions in our organization, and maybe even provide some training on how to champion some of these important developments that can enhance the lives of the individuals in the organization, as well as the organization itself. I've been in organizations where these champions exist, and it is wonderful. And yes, they are profiting from it, but far more than that, there is just a strong climate of support, collaboration, engagement, positivity about the future, employee development, because there are people not just talking about it, but truly championing and standing as a champion for issues related to inclusion and other thoughts that have been mentioned in today's discussion.
Ken, I think what Ken is sort of even alluding to even further or heading toward is helping leadership establish a business case for inclusion, because it definitely, there's significant depths of research on this, how having an inclusive, diverse workforce combats groupthink and fosters greater innovation and creativity in solving problems and seizing advantage. So I think it and also circles around to Heather's what she has articulated in that Venn diagram too. I think it's a crucial opportunity. We've got to seize upon inclusive training as an opportunity for advancing a business, promoting growth, but also mitigating risk. Speaking with this sort of vocabulary can help leadership embrace it and drive it, I think, based on what my experience.
Ken, would you like to address, we have 5 or 6 minutes remaining, or we could go longer. It's quite all right. Or we can cut it off in 5 or 6 minutes. Ken, has anyone talked to you, or have you been asked to get involved in a discussion on ROI of remote work? And it could mean being on assignment or just working from home.
Yeah, I certainly had discussions on this with people at various levels in organizations. I'm actually supportive of it in a lot of respects, because we know people do get a great amount of work done working remotely. There are fewer interruptions. Employees actually are putting in longer hours, particularly salaried employees, not hourly. The boundaries are kind of gone. So early in the morning they're on it, late at night They're on their computers, they're doing email, they're having discussions. There are fewer interruptions. We're not seeing the long lunches, and we're not seeing the time and the stress associated with commuting to and from work, as well as for those who are doing it by car, the cost of fuel, the cost of wear and tear on their automobiles, and employees truly like it. Obviously, it does come with a cost. And I think what we're seeing now is employers going the route of, all right, let's go with more of a hybrid workplace where employees will come in X number of days a week. And even at that, a lot of employees that I've spoken with are not even happy with that prospect, but at least it's not saying, all right, everybody back to work, come here right now, everyone full time. And I know some entities and organizations, public and private, are doing that. But I think that particularly we've talked about Gen Z a little bit today. I think to relate to them and to deal with what they're looking for at work, I think we have to be cognizant of the fact that there are some real benefits associated with some aspect, at least, of remote work, measurable benefits associated with it. And I don't want to bring a bunch of people back to work. They're all dissatisfied. They're annoyed that they have to be here. We know that if people are dissatisfied, they will look for an opportunity where their needs will be satisfied. And that may be going somewhere else, or it'll simply be striking back to the organization or putting in less effort. I don't want to create that kind of a situation either. So I think it'll be very interesting to see what happens as companies go forward on this. So yeah, I've had discussions on it. No firm final answers. As I said, I think to go the hybrid route at this point makes the most sense if companies are going to take that kind of step. But what do you do when you have a super employee working remotely full time? And far off remotely, not down the block.
No, this is good. Can you make that larger? Yeah. Oh, that's it. Perfect. So this is a word salad.
Word cloud.
Word cloud. Okay,
Although
somebody.
salads are good
unmuted.
too.
Yeah, but this is with everyone who put in their feelings into, or their interpretations of inclusion into the chat, and verbally what you've verbalized. And I've just captured some of those things.
Oh.
It was really difficult to get long sentences in, so I had to do a little bit of parsing there. But anyway, this is the power of diversity of thinking, and how one word like inclusion can mean different things for different people globally around the world. But ultimately, we've seen today that it really can be positive, and that there can be a real benefit and a return on human-centered insights. So that's what I would like to leave with you today. It's not just the multi-generations we're seeing in the workforce and the future with AI, which is wonderful, but let's focus on our humanity, human connection, and what we can all achieve together if we're working not in isolation, but we're all working together. Even though it means different things for each of us, it's something really positive that we can take away.
Thank you all for being on the program. I certainly want you to come back as we go to the next step with this topic, this theme. We'd like to do another edition. And I don't really want to grow the audience, live audience on the show. We want to grow the viewing audience, that's for sure. And that's my job to do that. But if you would like to have me invite somebody who you know, please send me a note, and I'm very happy to reach out so we can add one or two or three or four more people, and I think it will still be manageable. I think this is optimal, this size, but I think some topics such as this need to have more voices. What do you think, John?
We need to have more voices, yes, but we also need to have more champions. This isn't it's one of those things that's not going to go anywhere unless people actually are willing to take action on it. And I think that with the folks we have here and some others that we can add, we can help to develop those champions, give them the courage and the tools they need to push this forward.
Ken?
Yeah, I think the champion point, as I said earlier, that Heather brought out is really key to pulling all of those words together and championing them to really make inclusion reality in organizations today. So Heather, I think wonderful job pulling this together and giving us this framework for us to talk about, think, and grow. So thank you very, very much.
No, thank you all. I mean, you're all my inspiration. And what I love about Ed and, you know, the show that I've been sharing, I know many of you are long esteemed, you know, travelers with Ed, and I'm a new journey person along the way. But what I love is that, and what I love about the Circle of Psychology is the sharing of thought leadership, of you've all written, you know, wonderful books, and you're all so generous with your spirit in how you share your ideas. And this is inclusion. This is inclusion in action. You know, there was a great American, Arthur Miller, who said in the 1950s, and this is what inspired me to become a psychologist. And he said that psychology is only powerful if it's given away, because information is power only when you give it away. It's not about being the best and only you know something and people have to come to you. It's about giving it away. And one of my advocacies really is that I give psychology away and hopefully make it more accessible to people so that they feel as passionate about it as I do.
Thank you. Dan, this has been a wonderful thing to have you on this program, and I welcome you to come back.
Thanks so much, Ed. It's great to see you. And as per the norm, with an Ed Cohen session, incredibly meaningful and completely unabashed about making connections. You're an absolute master. I appreciate the opportunity.
But
and
if you weren't there,
great.
I wouldn't be able to practice. So thank you for being there.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you all. Have a good one.
I
So,
know.
be well, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Heather.